I died for 6 minutes in 2003. Heaven isn't what we think it is. With apologies to the religious, I feel my story must be shared. In 2003, when I was 15 years old, my heart stopped for 6 minutes. It happened on an ordinary afternoon at the point in my daily routine when I walked home from the bus stop. In the 4 blocks between the corner where I hopped off the bus and my front door, I started to feel nauseous. It came on suddenly, without warning. I'd felt just fine all day, ate a lunch of Bosco sticks and marinara sauce, something I'd eaten hundreds of times throughout high school. Before I had an opportunity to consider alternative causes, I broke out in a cold sweat. Then I felt the curious flutter in my chest. My heart slipped into what I later learned was an episode of ventricular fibrillation. I became breathless and collapsed. What happened next has been told to me after the fact. I apparently sprawled in the road, where a woman driving a hatchback nearly crushed my skull beneath her tires. Instead, she screeched to a halt, tried to rouse me, then dialed emergency services when she failed to do so. EMS arrived to discover my heart had stopped beating. I was dead, technically. They transported my body to the hospital, and somewhere along the way managed to shock my ticker back to life. Thus began a harrowing, weeks-long journey through the American healthcare system that led eventually to an ablation, pacemaker, and mountains of debt my family's still dealing with. But my heart's all right, and thank fuck it is, because what I learned that day has taught me never to thank God for anything. Because for those 6 minutes, as my lifeless body traveled across the city, accompanied by 2 paramedics working tirelessly to revive me, my soul transcended our world to visit the hereafter. During my visit, I learned things about our universe that I wish I hadn't. Perhaps in sharing my story, I might help our species prepare for what comes after we expire. It began with light, blinding, white, pervasive. It bathed me, calmed me. It was everything they tell you about. Beatific, welcoming, the stuff of spiritual experiences. I had the distinct feeling of ascent, like the light was lifting me skyward. I passed through several sets of gates, which my dizzied consciousness hardly registered. Upon reflection, I don't believe they were physical in any sense, and yet I recall the feeling of admittance, as if they might have prevented me from rising had they remained closed. In any event, I arrived in a place without dimension, a place beyond reality. It only made sense while I occupied it. I don't believe a corporeal being can make sense of the astral plane. Something about its intangible existence defies translation. So what I came away with were more impressions than images. I was not alone. Several life forces enclosed me upon my arrival. At first, because of my Christian upbringing, I believed them to be angels. In my incorporeal form, I made the spiritually equivalent gesture of opening my arms, anticipating their embrace. Instead, I felt myself shackled by their powers, like a collared dog. Humiliation and terror came over me. These were not the ethereal beings I'd been led to believe await us. These were cruel, unsympathetic overlords by whom I was fettered. Why, I thought, my soul wailing like a petulant child? Something like laughter returned, but it was cold, mocking. Thoughts floated into my consciousness like birds winging in and out of sight. They delivered some horrifying truths about existence that I'll do my best to relate to you now. Our universe, like many others running parallel to it, contains a pittance of the total energy in existence. It is a farm used to produce souls, which only arise in the precise conditions found in our cosmos. When you hear scientists talk about the improbability of the existence of our Goldilocks universe, it's because they don't actually come into being spontaneously. They're designed, and the hands that craft them are not benevolent gods, but rapacious beings with little care for the creatures they create. Our ultimate purpose, I learned in the custody of the spirits that shackled me, was to ripen until we were ready to serve them on their higher plane. The Big Bang gave birth to the universe to give rise to life to eventuate in humanity, a sufficiently conscious organism that may be harvested for use as slaves on a higher plane, where time and space dissolve into an eternity we spend in servitude. 6 minutes in heaven felt like a lifetime, which I spent amusing what I perceived to be a childlike spirit with a penchant for psychologically distressing manipulation. It batted me around like a cat with a caught mouse, reveling in the pain it produced. Physical discomforts we imagine hell inflicting upon us pale in comparison to the torture of soul pain. Loss of a loved one comes closest, that piercing, emotional damage resulting from trauma. When it became clear my time had not yet expired on Earth and I was to return, I was told not to reveal their existence to the rest of my kind. My reward, they communicated to me, would be a marginally improved station among the slave population. Alternatively, if I managed to convince others of their existence, new horrors would await me when I returned. I can't imagine anything worse than what I experienced, subsumed beneath an ineffable grief and torment. For weeks, I tried to explain to anyone who would listen what I experienced. Everyone told me I'd suffered a very serious and traumatic experience for a young man, that the event left scars on my psyche as well as my heart. I gave up trying to convince them. I slowly began to convince myself that what they told me was true. I'd simply imagined it, a death dream, as it were, the mind reckoning with its own imminent demise, trying to make sense of the experience. Then I met someone who claimed to have met God. This was a few years later, when the author of a nonfiction book recounting their near-death experience visited my hometown. I won't reveal the author's name, as I don't want to invite a lawsuit, which I'm sure he'd launch against me if he read that I'd besmirched him. I attended a reading and afterward confronted him about his tale. I looked him in the eye and asked if he really met God, something I'm sure he's dealt with hundreds of times. He smiled and nodded, assuring me that, yes, God is real and is filled with love. On a lark, I decided to tell him that I knew the truth, that slavery awaits us all. A flicker in his gaze betrayed his knowledge of the fact. He really had died and visited the afterlife, but lied about it in his book, because he knew the truth of heaven, the horrible place our souls are bound for. If you encounter this out-of-place character, turn the game off immediately. I really don't know if this has happened to anyone else before, but just in case it does, take this story as a reminder. You'll thank me later. I was around 15 when this happened. It was also, ironically, October and just 18 days away from Halloween. I had just went back to my room after having fish and chips for dinner, and out of boredom, I decided to play on my gaming computer. I chose a classic, Team Fortress 2, and went as Pyro since I like to burn everything I see in my path for fun. I was on the map Thunder Mountain and we were getting near the checkpoint and the enemy team were beating our asses, so I decided to flank them by surprise while trying not to get headshot by one of their 4 snipers. I was nearly at the other side in the left building, where it overlooked the enemy base, and had my scorch shot ready when I noticed it. A corpse sitting at the bottom of the stairs. I thought it was a player at first, but when I looked closely, it didn't look like any of the 9 classes. In fact, it didn't look like it belonged in the game at all. It was more polished than Team Fortress 2's actual graphics. It looked like a man wearing a brown suit, but covered in blood, and the jaw was hanging open in the most uncomfortable way I could imagine. It looked like it was dislocated and stretched downwards. I was already used to violence in games, but this felt a bit too real for me. Eventually, I decided to just walk past it, but the game decided to lag when I did so. This lag then got me killed by an enemy soldier, who I didn't see coming at all. Hell, I didn't even have enough time to air blast his rocket back at him. We won the first round anyways, but I had school tomorrow, so I turned off my game and went to bed. I still don't know what I saw, but since it was Halloween, I thought that maybe it was just a strange Easter egg that the creators put in. That same thought aged like milk when I saw it again in the Minecraft. I was playing with a friend overseas, I'm Australian, and we decided to try and find some diamonds like most Minecraft players would do. We find a cave and kill any mobs that got in our way. I had the most torches, so I gave half of them to my friend and decided to split up like idiotic characters from a horror movie. Now this is where we enter the nope territory. At this point, I was lost in the cave and I only had like 9 torches left, so I placed them anywhere I could find, and just as I placed the 5th torch, there it was, still in the same position, but it didn't even look like a Minecraft character at all. It didn't even have a few blocky polygons. It jump scared me so fucking badly I nearly fell out of my seat. Like I literally jolted so hard that my headphones were ripped out from my computer. I stood away from my computer, my heart beating like a drum and my breathing matching the same speed. Then I calmed down when I noticed my friends saying in the chat, "Yo, I found a few diamonds. Let's get out of this creepy-ass place." I turned my back on the non-blocky corpse, and I was just replying to my friend when I noticed yet another message in chat. But it wasn't from my friend, it was from a player with a blank username. They said, "Don't leave." I turned around to face it again, but now it was standing up. I never disconnected from a game that fast in my whole fucking life. Later on, I got a message from my friend asking me why I suddenly left the game. I explained what had happened, and asking him if he saw the message in the chat that asked me not to leave. I was expected him to ask me if I was joking, but I didn't expect him to say, "Wait, I actually did see that message. I thought our server was private. Did you download a mod from a sketchy site?" I never downloaded any mods, but you probably already knew that. So I'm not crazy. My friend saw its message, and if that was the case, I needed to find the player who killed me from Team Fortress 2 the other day. I managed to find them and asked if they recall seeing a corpse where they killed me in Thunder Mountain. I guess I did. It was probably a spy. Why you asking me this, bro? Funny thing is, there were no spies on our team. I had no idea what the hell I was dealing with. A ghost inside my computer? An advanced virus that was secretly downloaded? Who knows? Then came the worst night of my life. I was fast asleep when I heard my phone's notification buzzing from my bedside table. I groaned as I woke up and grabbed my phone, reading what was sent to me. "Why did you leave?" It was from an unknown number. It was blank. "Who is this?" I replied, which when I look back at it today was a stupid fucking decision. They immediately replied with, "If you won't let me out, I will let myself out." Suddenly my computer turned on by itself, like it literally booted itself up. I watched as my desktop background turned into a horrifying image I'll never erase from my brain. It was a close-up of the corpse. It was staring at me with bulging, ready-to-explode eyes, even though they were facing different directions. The detail on its jaw injury looked so realistic, it was like something from a live leak video. I was scared stiff, so scared that I pissed my sheets without a care. Then it started to move. It raised its left arm at a slow pace and threw a punch at the screen, then repeat and repeat until the punching got a bit more faster. The banging got so loud that I snapped out of my stiffness and quickly crawled off my bed into my computer, then pulling the plug out. Long story short, I ended sleeping in the living room that night. The unknown number had vanished like it never existed. I stopped using my computer for a while. That night spooked me to my fucking core. I wasn't able to sleep unless I put a sheet over my computer, which I still do this today. Yes, I still have it. I'm thinking of selling it someday. Months later, we ended up having to move out. I was packing my things from my room and I was about to pack away my computer when I noticed something on the screen. It was small, but it was able to make my blood run cold. It was a tiny crack. My sister's ex-boyfriend keeps showing up at family events. She's been dead for 2 years. When my sister Lisa died 2 years ago, our family changed forever. We weren't perfect before, who is? But Lisa's death fractured us. My dad barely speaks anymore. My mom busies herself with every charity event she can find. And I've been stuck, angry, looking for someone to blame. Lisa was the glue that held us together. She was warm, outgoing, always laughing, the kind of person people gravitate to. She loved hiking, photography, and the outdoors. Her death, officially ruled an accident, was almost poetic. She slipped while hiking and fell into a ravine. At least, that's what the police report said. But if that's true, why does it feel like her ghost never left? Lisa's ex-boyfriend, Matt, was never part of our family. He and Lisa dated for about a year before she broke it off. She said he was controlling, obsessive, constantly texting, showing up unannounced, making passive-aggressive comments when she spent time with her friends. I remember her joking about it once, calling him my stage 5 clinger. But it wasn't funny, not really. After the breakup, Matt didn't take it well. He kept texting her, leaving voicemails, even sending her flowers at work. She brushed it off, said he'd get bored eventually. I thought she was right. Until the funeral. Matt didn't come to the service, thank God. But a week later, he showed up on our doorstep. It was a rainy Thursday. My mom opened the door and there he was, holding a bouquet of lilies, Lisa's favorite. "I just wanted to pay my respects," he said. His voice was soft, his head tilted like he was trying to look vulnerable. My mom, who has never been good at saying no, let him in. Matt sat on our couch talking about Lisa as if he knew her better than we did. He described her laugh, her smile, the way she always ordered pancakes with extra syrup. My dad stayed silent, his jaw tight. When Matt finally left, I asked my mom why she let him in. "He's grieving too," she said. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Matt wasn't grieving. He was lurking. Over the next few months, Matt kept appearing. He showed up at family barbecues, holiday dinners, even my dad's birthday party. Always uninvited, always with some excuse. "Your mom said it was okay," he'd claim, or "I thought Lisa would have wanted me here." My parents, blinded by their own grief, let it slide. "He's harmless," my mom said. "He just misses her." But it wasn't harmless, not when he started asking questions. Last Christmas, Matt cornered me in the kitchen. "She was different with me, you know," he said, leaning against the counter. I stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" He smiled, that thin, unsettling smile I'd seen so many times. "She told me things she wouldn't tell anyone else." "Like what?" His smile widened, like how she wasn't scared to die. That night, I went through Lisa's journals. She was the type to write everything down, her thoughts, her plans, even little grocery lists. Most of it was normal Lisa stuff, song lyrics, doodles, random observations. But then I found the entry. "I think Matt's been following me. He won't stop texting, keeps saying he knows something I don't. I'm starting to feel like I can't shake him." I showed it to my mom, expecting her to finally see reason, but she waved it off. "Lisa was dramatic sometimes," she said. "I'm sure it's nothing." A few days later, I saw Matt's car parked down the street. It wasn't the first time. I'd noticed it before, idling near the corner, but I convinced myself it was a coincidence. This time, though, I knew. He wasn't watching our family. He was watching me. Last week was my dad's birthday. Matt showed up, holding a gift he claimed Lisa would have bought, a coffee table book about hiking trails. I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him outside, away from my parents. "What the hell are you doing here?" I snapped. His smile didn't falter. "Paying my respects," he said. "Lisa broke up with you. She wanted nothing to do with you. Why can't you let her go?" His eyes darkened. "She told you that?" "Yes." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She told me a lot of things, too, things she didn't tell anyone else." Then he said something I'll never forget. I was there, you know, on the trail. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "What?" He smiled again. "A cold, empty thing. She didn't fall. She looked me in the eyes and asked me to let her go." My stomach churned. "You're lying." He tilted his head, studying me. "Oh, who am I? Ask yourself this. If she slipped, why didn't she scream?" I called the police that night. I told them everything, the stalking, the journal, his confession. When they went to his apartment the next morning, it was empty. No furniture, no clothes, no sign he'd ever lived there. It's been a week now. I haven't told my parents what he said. I don't know if they'd believe me. Every night I double-check the locks. Every night I sit in my bed, clutching my phone, too scared to sleep. Last night I finally decided to look through Lisa's journals again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I missed something. Maybe I was looking for answers. But this time there was something new. The last page, which had been blank before, now had a single sentence scrawled across it in jagged black ink. "He's not watching, he's inside." I wish we never learned the true reason why the night is dark. We've all gazed at the sky and maybe have asked the question, why is the sky blue? But have you ever truly pondered the night? Why is there such darkness in space? Why does the vast expanse of space feel so cold, so empty, so desolate? Throughout history, brilliant minds have wielded science and mathematics to unravel the mysteries of space and time. But did anyone answer why? Why is it that the speed of light is limited while distances of cosmic objects are so huge? Why is space so empty and dead? Why are the only examples of life we know exist on a single planet orbiting a single star? There's a harsh truth we often forget. We are small, limited creatures. We perceive only 3 spatial dimensions and experience time as a single, unbroken thread. What if beyond our senses or understanding lies a reality so alien that it eludes even the sharpest minds? I am an astrophysicist, and it was my life's work to figure out these questions. Questions rarely pondered in today's world. What I discovered was a terrible truth about the nature of our universe. It would have been the most earth-shattering discovery had the world's governments not suppressed it. Surely you must have observed how things have changed over the last few decades. The way governments have stopped planning for the future, the way corporations are hoarding resources like there's no tomorrow. It's not just greed, they know. I don't think staying silent is an option anymore. People deserve to know, even if the truth breaks them. If this post disappears, or if I do, you'll understand why. It started soon after the Apollo lunar missions. Space exploration was at its peak, and we had mountains of data to process. As we studied the data, we noticed anomalies in the light's temperature fluctuations. Subtle but consistent deviations that suggested something odd about the way light had traveled in the early universe. Further analysis revealed that these fluctuations couldn't be explained by known physical models. Einstein was completely wrong. We had evidence that the speed of light was not a constant. In fact, in the early universe, it was almost infinite, but had slowed down to the value we observe today. Leading physicists dismissed our findings as speculative nonsense. They claimed our methodology was flawed. The heart of the controversy lay in the implications of our work. If light had indeed slowed down, it undermined one of the most important constants in physics. The speed of light wasn't just a number, it was a cornerstone of modern science. To question it was to question the very structure of the universe. The US government played a significant role in suppressing our work as it undermined the careers of a lot of very prominent and well-paid scientists. I still continued my work in obscurity. My reputation was tarnished beyond repair, but I refused to give up. See, if the speed of light had slowed, it raised a haunting question. Why? Physics offers no mechanism for such a change. Constants, by their very nature, are supposed to be unchanging. A changing speed of light implied an external force, something beyond our understanding of the universe. It suggested interference, not just with light, but with the fundamental laws of reality. And if that interference was deliberate, who or what was responsible? This was what made even the bravest physicists uncomfortable. As technology advanced, more scientists joined me as they independently figured out the truth and were subsequently ridiculed and suppressed. In hindsight, perhaps they were justified in their efforts to silence us. Even now, I can't help but regret that we ever dared to seek the answer to the question of why. It all started with something we found in the early 2000s. Infrared surveys of the cosmic microwave background, CMB, the faint radiation left over from the Big Bang, found something we didn't expect. There was a strange glow superimposed on the CMB. It was faint, like static, but it was structured. At first, we thought it might be a calibration error or interference, but the glow was real, and when we mapped it out, it formed patterns. Not random patterns, complex ones. It was like finding fingerprints in the oldest layers of the universe. When we looked closer at the data, we found something horrifying. The universe was once a vibrant, radiant expanse, teeming with light and life far beyond what we can comprehend today. The cosmos wasn't always the cold, empty void we see now. It was filled with energy, potential, and life in a way that we could scarcely imagine. But then something changed. Something began to drain it, changing the constants of reality. A force or an entity, perhaps, not of this dimension, slowly siphoned off the universe's vitality, consuming energy and leaving behind the desolate expanse we now call space. And perhaps most terrifying of all, this force or entity, whatever it is, isn't gone. You've probably heard of the Boots Void. It's a massive region of space with almost no galaxies in it, so empty that it makes everything around it seem unnaturally dense. Astronomers have always thought it was just a natural phenomenon, the result of random fluctuations in the universe's early expansion. But we studied it meticulously. That was our evidence that the force or entity is still out there, snuffing out galaxies and stars at a phenomenal scale. Based on our calculations, we have tragically very little time left. Maybe in a day or maybe in 1,000 years, we will certainly be wiped from existence, consumed by forces beyond our comprehension. We are not drifting in an endless sea, but trapped in a cold, dark prison with its walls closing in every second. The Fermi paradox. The question of why we haven't found alien life was never a paradox. We haven't found life because we're the last ones left. The final embers of life in a universe that's already gone dark. There is nothing we can do to stop this. We are like insects trying to stop an earthquake. Our leaders know the truth. That's why progress has stalled. That's why governments have abandoned their dreams of the stars. They're preparing for the end, even if they won't admit it. So the next time you look up at the night sky, remember this: the silence you see is not natural, it is deliberate, a haunting stillness that echoes the universe's slow death. And soon we will all fall into that same silence, forgotten, like the stars themselves. I can't remember how I met my best friend. Kaylee has been my best friend for as long as I can remember. For me, that's not a figure of speech. I literally can't remember how I met her. I can't find any photos of me with her before 3rd grade, so I guess I met her around then. Strangely though, she's not in any of my class photos. I remember her coming over my house all the time, but I don't ever remember going to hers. These things never struck me as weird until a few days ago, when I really sat down and thought about them. Some things in life you just sort of accept as fact, right? They've gone on so long you don't remember how they started. Like how I always put eggs on the top shelf of the fridge, or how I always tuck my blanket under my feet before going to bed. I don't remember how it started, I've just always done it that way, as long as I can remember. So how did I meet her? I don't remember. They say if you lose your sight, you don't see pitch black, or nothingness, or a void. You just have the absence of sight. That's how it is for me with Kaylee. There's no remnant of a memory, nothing on the tip of my tongue. It just isn't there. A few days ago, I asked her about it. Do you remember how we met? What do you mean? She asked, her smile faltering. Well, we met when I was around 8, right? But you went to a different school, so how did we meet? It was at that summer camp, wasn't it? She asked, with the bottle rockets. I don't think so. I'd only gone one summer, and I was pretty sure that was the summer after 4th grade. Church then. Which church? Kaylee paused. The one off Main Street with the steeple? Which one? Oh, I'm not sure. You know I'm not religious, she said with a laugh. The one on the corner or on Elm Street? She paused. Elm, I think. Well, my parents took me to St. Paul's on the corner, I said, so it couldn't have been church. Huh, she said, shrugging. Then I don't know how we met. It was weird. She seemed confused, and yet it almost felt like she was playing the role of a fortune teller, throwing out vague answers and hoping I'd jump in with more details. So you don't remember how we met? I said with finality. I guess I don't. She shook her head, her bleach blonde hair shaking around her face. Isn't that silly? We've been best friends for 10 years and we can't even remember how we met. I wanted to ask her more, but then my roommate got home, and my roommate is a bit persnickety, so we decided to quietly watch a movie in my room to give her some peace. It seemed weird to bring up again. I was probably overthinking things. That night, however, I couldn't sleep. As Kaylee slept peacefully on the futon in the common area, I lay wide awake in my bed. Why can't I remember? And then a thought occurred to me. Someone else must remember. I went on Facebook and clicked over to our 21 mutual friends. I started scrolling, making a mental list of who was most likely to know. But then a sudden realization hit me. Each of these friends, I'd introduced to her. None of these were her friends originally. They were all mine. I squinted at the screen. How does that make sense? Has she really never introduced me to her friends? And now that I thought about it, she was always visiting me at my dorm, making the 2-hour drive. She offered because I was broke and couldn't afford the gas. But maybe there was more to it than that. Why had I never thought about this before? I scrolled back through my Facebook photos to some childhood photos I'd posted. Kaylee was in them, sure as day. She looked different. Her hair wasn't bleached then. Her face was chubbier. But from the dimples to the sharp chin, it was her. I clicked back on her Facebook page and scrolled, and that's when I realized something. Every single post involved me or one of our 21 mutual friends. I didn't see a single tag by someone I didn't know. Well, that could be the privacy settings, couldn't it? Like her friends who've tagged her have made the post only visible to their friends or mutuals or something, but not a single post. It was like her entire life revolved around me. Like every single event in her life was related to me, directly or indirectly. I gave up on sleep. I got out of bed and walked into the common room, grabbing a Coke from the mini fridge. Kaylee was sleeping soundly on the futon. I glanced over at her, my heart pounding. Her pale skin was blue in the light from the microwave clock. Muffled music came from my roommate's room. She was still up. With my mind racing and no one else to talk to, I went over. "Can I come in for a second?" I called quietly through the door. As soon as she opened it, I darted inside. "There's something weird about Kaylee," Isabel scoffed. Yeah, duh." "What?" "She's weird, always has been. You just noticing this now?" I frowned at her. "Okay, sorry, that came out really mean, but it's true, she's just weird. I wish she wouldn't come over every weekend, but since you're really good about Ben coming over, I never say anything." "She doesn't come over every weekend," I huffed. "It's been a lot. I mean, she was here homecoming weekend, then those 2 weekends in October, then Halloween." "She wasn't here Halloween," I protested. "Oh yes, she was," Isabel replied. "Ben and I had to go over to his place because she was here with you." I shook my head. "No, she wasn't here Halloween." We stared at each other. Isabel's irritation melted to confusion. "She wasn't here. I had COVID, remember? But I saw her when we came back from the Beta Theta Pi party. She was here. We had to go to Ben's place." The room started to tilt around me. I remember being so sick that weekend, in and out of sleep half the day. But she was here without me knowing. "You must have gotten the weekends confused," I said weakly. "No, I remember it clearly because we were both in our costumes. Do you know how itchy that Harley Quinn wig is? Kaylee must have let herself in, but why?" Now that I thought about it, that weekend, there had been some weird stuff. I chalked it up to delirium at the time, but I remember not being able to find my phone. My milk was missing from the fridge. I thought it had been Isabel or Ben, but it had been Kaylee. She was here, watching me sleep. What the fuck? I was jolted out of my thoughts by a thump outside, coming from the common room. "Kaylee," I whispered. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, started down the hall. My door creaked open. "She's looking for me." I ran over to the door and locked it. I held a finger to my lips, standing absolutely still. So still I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. The footsteps started back up into the common room and then towards our door, getting louder. Isabel glanced down and her eyes went wide. "She's right there," Isabel mouthed to me. The footsteps stopped. The door handle made a ratcheting sound as Kaylee tried to turn it. Once, twice, 3 times. "Haley, are you in there?" I held my breath. "Isabel." I closed my eyes. She'll just go away. She'll think Isabel's asleep and I just stepped out. Isabel's computer is on, but it's dark in here, so we're fine. I took in a slow, quiet breath. We're fine. She's just going to go back to sleep. 2, 3, 4. "I know you're in there," a raspy whisper, unlike anything I'd heard Kaylee say, and it was coming from the crack under the door. I could feel her breath against my ankles. Isabel clapped a hand over her mouth. I took a shaking step away from the door. "Let me in," she whispered. Her slim, pale fingers shot through the crack under the door and swept back and forth, quickly, frantically, trying to grab any part of us she could. "Let me in now!" Isabel grabbed her phone off the desk and dialed 911. The fingers retracted and footsteps sounded in the common room. By the time the police got here, Kaylee was gone. It's been 2 days and I haven't heard from Kaylee. I think about her every waking minute. I've barely eaten or slept. I keep replaying that night through my head, wondering what she would have done if I hadn't locked the door. I've done my research though, combed through social media and photo albums and everything. There is no physical evidence that Kaylee existed in my life before a year ago. Because those photos from my childhood? My mom insists I never had a friend named Kaylee. When she dug the old photo albums out of the attic, she wasn't in any of them. Kaylee's face only appeared in the digital scans of the photos I'd posted online. Photos I'd posted in the past year. And those 21 mutual friends, they all met her in the past year too. She'd made an effort to befriend my friends, find them online. But none of the friendships went back more than a year. I'd checked each and every one. And now, suddenly, I'm having trouble recalling all those memories with her. I can barely remember what she looked like. Blonde hair, pale skin, dimples. I knew that much. But if you showed me a lineup of 10 girls with those qualities, I don't think I'd be able to pick her out. Which leads me to the horrifying conclusion. If she ever finds me again, whether that's in days or years or decades, I won't even know it's her. I moved in with my girlfriend recently. I don't feel safe anymore. I met my girlfriend Victoria 7 months ago in a bar. We felt an instant connection and started dating 3 days later. She brought nothing but happiness, the perfect definition of a soulmate. So when I graduated from university, we both agreed to move in together. She's 2 years older than me and was already working, so I moved into her house. However, after moving in, everything went downhill. The first incident happened on the first night of moving in. Victoria works night shift, so she was getting ready to head out. "Babe, I'm off to work now. Just to tell you again, the neighbors next door get a little cranky at night, so just ignore them," she said sweetly. Yeah, I get it." I responded. I gave her a kiss goodbye and she left, leaving me alone in her house. I sat down on the kitchen table and got to work. For context, I work remotely as a character designer for a video game company. It was peaceful for a few hours until the clock hit 2 a.m. The cranky neighbors began screaming profusely. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it sounded like an intense argument. I tried ignoring it for a while, but eventually the sound became unbearable. Banging was heard on the walls, glass shattering on the floor, followed by more screaming and arguing. So much so that it sounded like multiple voices overlapping each other. I tried blasting music in my headphones, but that didn't help. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore, so I called it a night and stopped working. The next day passed by in a flash. I chose not to tell Victoria about the neighbors since it was apparently normal, and I didn't want her to think that it bothered me so much. It was her house after all. Nighttime came and I was watching TV in the sofa when the arguments from the neighbors came again. Thumping, glass shattering, furniture being thrown around. You'd think their house is a WWE ring. Jesus Christ, I muttered to myself. Suddenly I started hearing banging on the door, followed by a blood-curdling scream. "What the fuck?" I said while pausing the movie I was watching. The neighbor was trying to break into the house. That's it. That was the last straw. I got up and went to the back door where the banging and screaming was being heard. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen table in case the man would break the door. Thank God it was locked. Just in case, I leaned against it, each punch crushing my back. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. For all I knew, the man could seriously hurt me. It felt like an eternity before what I'm assuming is a man stopped banging the door. Concurrently, the screaming stopped, and it was silent. "The fuck," I muttered under my breath. There was no way I was going to live in these conditions. I decided that I was going to confront Victoria about it when she got home. With that in mind, I made sure all the doors were locked, windows shut, and went to bed. A few hours later at 6 a.m., my girlfriend got home and laid down in the bed next to me. She hugged me from behind and gave me a kiss on the nape, waking me up. "How's everything?" she asked softly. Were the neighbors loud? I grunted and turned my head to face her, rubbing my eyes. "What?" Victoria giggled. "How did it go with the neighbors?" I found it strange that she asked me that today, but not yesterday. Maybe it was me being tired. "The husband tried breaking in," I said. "He banged on the door for at least 2 minutes screaming. I thought that was the end for me. Seriously, Victoria, I don't think this house is safe for us to live in." As long as the door is locked, you should be fine. She smiled sweetly. I gave Victoria a serious look. Listen, I can't live with these conditions. I tried to say it as nicely as possible. I didn't even feel safe in this house last night. You're telling me this is going to happen every single night? Victoria looked down, her eyelids drooping down in discomfort. I felt sorry blaming her for something that wasn't her fault, but we obviously needed to do something about it. I can't fear for my life every night. I'll call the wife tonight and see if anything can be done. She hugged me tightly. Okay? I smiled and kissed her forehead. Thank you, baby. I know it's not your fault, but it's impossible to live in fear in my own house every night. On the following evening, Victoria left for her night shift. Once again, I was left alone in her house. She texted me around 15 minutes later, telling me that the problem was solved and that it should be better tonight. I thanked her and laid down on the sofa to wind down. I ended up falling asleep while watching a movie. I woke up a few hours later at 4 a.m. to screaming from the psychotic neighbors once again. Furious, I got out of bed and prepared myself for confrontation. I was ready to finally get to the bottom of this. However, as I walked closer to the front door, something felt off. I noticed the voices and banging a little closer than usual, as if they were in the same house. It was the first time I ever paid attention to where the sound was truly coming from. But it was still unexpected, subtle but unexpected. Following the traces of sound, the screams didn't take me to the front entrance or to the house next door. They took me to the basement door, the only part of the house I haven't gone into yet. My heart began racing. This has to be my hallucinations. The sounds can't be coming from my girlfriend's basement, right? With my legs trembling, I tried to push the basement door open, but it was locked. It only resulted in even louder screams coming from downstairs. They sounded like a cry for help. What the fuck is down there? I muttered. The thought alone sent shivers down my spine. Thankfully, or unthankfully, my uncle taught me lockpicking when I was younger in case I was in a dangerous situation where I needed it. Thanks, Uncle Will. So if there has ever been an opportunity to use that skill, it would be now. I took 2 paper clips and started fidgeting them inside of the lock. In just a few minutes, the door unlocked, but it still wouldn't open. I looked around the house for anything I could use until I found a crowbar. Using all my might, I pushed the door open. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. Instantly, I heard loud, blood-curdling screams piercing my ears. Screams that you would only hear in horror movies. Covering my ears, I forced my way downstairs. What I saw was horrific. Dead bodies of dozens of guys were organized in a line on the floor across the basement. Worst of all, every guy there looked to be around my age. Many looking like the exes Victoria had talked about in passing, screaming in absolute agonizing pain. From what I saw, it looked to be their souls, the sealed, trapped souls of innocent men facing endless pain in their afterlife. The stench was unbearable. Their bodies were bled out, as if everything inside of these men were sucked out to leave only their pure skin. Despite that, their faces were somewhat recognizable, each body neatly placed to keep its original shape. Their names were written in blood in front of each body: Jack, Noah, Michael, etc. Their screams sounded more like loud gasps from up close. The room was so loud I was getting dizzy. The screams only got louder. It sounded loud enough to screech into my brain. My mind went blank, my body shaking at the thought that this was my girlfriend's creation. It got even worse when I got to the end. Another name written in blood with no body behind it, as if it was still being prepared. Dylan. That was my name. I then got a notification on my phone, a message from Victoria. My heart stopped just by reading it. Hey babe, OMW home. Sorry about yesterday. Let's have some fun tonight.